Good morning, everybody. My name is Brett Augustine. I'm one of the business advisors for the North Central Texas Small Business Development Centers. We're a leading provider for assistance for small businesses. We are grant funded, which allows us to offer our services at no cost to you. And this session is being recorded for those of you who may not have been able to make it, or you jump in a little bit later. Please just know that we'll be sending out where you can find that, which is on our YouTube channel after this session. If you have any questions during this time, please put questions in the chat room, and Ashley and myself will try to get to it as we go or at the end. And speaking of Ashley, for those people who doesn't know Ashley Smalley, she's the founder of Smalley Consulting, a human resources consulting firm. Ashley's a certified human resources professional, trusted consultant, and facilitator in the workplace culture sphere. Her presentation today is The Way We Work. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Ashley Smalley.
Well, hey, everybody. I am so glad to be with you today and excited to talk about the way we work. My focus in Smalley Consulting is trying to build unity on teams. I want people to enjoy their work more because they enjoy the people they work with more. And so that's kind of what we're going to be looking through that lens for the way we work today. I'm going to encourage you. In fact, I'm going to all but beg you to pretty please participate. If you're feeling really brave and you want to turn that camera on, we will be very best friends. And if you don't, that's okay too. But use that chat and participate that way. That would be really helpful. The way we work is going to be based off of a book by Cynthia Tobias. She is my mentor. She has been in the business world and education space doing training and development for over 30 years. And the way we work is kind of a culmination of her research and her life's work. And she was so gracious to say, you know what, I'm nearing the end of my career and I don't want my life's work to stop with me. And so she gave me the opportunity to share and use her book in this way. And so I'm so grateful for that opportunity. And my hope and prayer is that you will walk away with a little more understanding about how you work and how the people around you work, and that it'll be really beneficial for you as it has been for me. To start, I want to kind of paint a picture and share a story with you. So I have two roles. I have an HR consulting company, but I also am part-time on the staff at my local church. And our pastor and I have very different thinking styles, learning styles, working styles. In fact, we couldn't be more polar opposite, and that makes for some interesting conversations. So we were in a staff meeting one day and he said, "Hey, Ashley, I want to create an opportunity this Sunday morning that's kind of unique and gives people an opportunity to connect in a very personal way. Can you just make that happen?" And I'm like, absolutely, we can make that happen. Do you have any idea what you want that to look like? Do you know how long you want that time to last? What's the purpose behind the connection? What are you trying to accomplish? Where do you want it to land in the service, at the beginning, the middle, the end? And he looked at me and said, "Hey, don't overcomplicate it. Just make it simple, easy, kind of whatever you think, just make it happen." And I'm like, I'm not overcomplicating it. I'm trying to gather the information that I need in order to execute the thing that you're asking for. I want to do what you want done. I need to know more information to be able to do it. And we both left that meeting completely frustrated. He was frustrated with me because he had given an assignment and I asked 1,000 questions, and I was frustrated with him because what was so obvious in his head was very unclear to me because there was a lack of detail. And I don't know if you've ever found yourself in a position like that where you're trying to work with somebody and one of you's big picture and one of you's detail oriented, and you cannot get on the same page. It creates a lot of frustration, a lot of irritation. If we're not careful, a lot of resentment and conflict as we go forward in trying to work with them on future projects as well. So if you have stories that really, truly, I'm about to ask some questions and you're going to have the opportunity to share to kind of bring the presentation to life. We are all very unique and complex people. We have different strengths, different weaknesses, different natural tendencies that we bring to the table. Not one of us is capable of being fully analyzed or clearly labeled. We're too unique for that. We're kind of like a puzzle. And we've got all these different pieces that make us up, and everybody has different sized puzzle pieces and they go in different orders, and the puzzle altogether looks different. But one thing is consistent, and that is that we're all kind of searching to know who we are, what we should be doing with our lives, and why the people around us don't understand us quite like we would like for them to. And there are lots of tools and programs out there in the world that will kind of help us categorize our personality or our brain or our mental health or whatever. Today, we're going to focus on something that's much simpler and easier to identify, that we just kind of inherently know about ourselves. When we put together a complex puzzle, normally most people are, I would say, sane people, and you can think differently if you want. We do the outside, we do the border first. And as I've been doing this training, I've learned not everybody does that. Some people start with the identifying characters in the puzzle or whatever, but most people start with the outside, the border. And that's kind of what we're looking at today. When we're done with this call, you're not going to be like, oh, I know exactly everything I need to know about me and all the people that are on my team. But we'll have a border of our own puzzle and a border of others that will give us some understanding and help us to understand our cognitive style a little better, the way that we process information. When we're done, my hope is that we will be able to look through and see ourselves with new eyes, but mostly see the other people around us with new eyes and with slightly less frustration. We want to better understand kind of the whole dynamic because we understand the parts of the team a little better. And the one thing that I hope you take away, if nothing else, is that most of the time, the people on our teams are not trying to annoy us. It's happening, but it's not intentional. It's just because we are wired differently. There are kind of three core concepts that will underline everything that we'll talk about today. The first is there's never a time in life when you're not learning something. We're always taking in information. We're always trying to grow. And when we understand our cognitive style, it helps us know how we're filtering the information that we're gathering and understanding it, remembering it, and helping us make decisions. The second thing is learning and communicating are inextricably linked. We tend to talk to people the way we want them to talk to us. And if everybody does that and no one ever makes an adjustment in the way we communicate with others, we're never going to be on the same page. And so learning to listen and to respond to someone who thinks differently than you, it's one of the most valuable skills you will ever develop, particularly when you think about running a small business, interacting with the people on your team, interacting with the people that you're serving as customers or clients. We've got to learn to listen and understand people who are different than us. The third kind of fundamental thing you've got to know going into today is we are all equal in worth and value, but none of us can do all things equally well. And we're going to need each other's strengths. And so kind of with that backdrop, we're going to dive into the day. So how do you process information? I said we're thinking about cognitive style, and that's how we process information. So I would love it if everyone would be really brave and really bold for just a second and either unmute yourself and say an answer out loud or type in the chat. Do you tend to be a big picture thinker or a detail thinker? Brett, what about you?
Thanks for calling me out, Ashley.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a broad stroker. So big picture all the time. I have problems with details. I just get the generality of things and then let it all fill in the details. It's actually very
Now,
difficult for some people.
Can you tell me what are some of the frustrations that could come from working with detail-oriented people when you're a big picture thinker?
Because you know that you're not fulfilling their need
Oh.
of what they want to hear from you so that you can actually move forward in a positive way, because they want to stop until you have all those details, but you don't want to stop. You just want to get there and then have those details. It's like, yeah, I know the direction. Let me just get started on the journey. I guess that's the best way to describe it mentally
Yeah.
anyway. It's like,
Well,
well,
and
standing here going over the details is slowing me down from actually achieving something, for example.
absolutely. When you're ready to move. I do appreciate the selfless approach of what you said, though, in terms of I don't feel like I'm capable of being able to give them what they need, because most of the time it's like, they're frustrating the fire out of me because they keep peppering me with questions that I don't know the answers to. And so thank you for the selfless approach. I promise you, if I had answered it, it would have been more selfish instead of selfless. So thank you for that. And what about, is anybody on the call a detail person? Christy, what are you?
Well, I'm going to have that really annoying answer and say, I believe I'm both. But as I get
Mhm.
more into specific things like what I'm doing now, I feel like I'm the detailed person. I most of
Okay.
the time understand the big picture and what the outcome needs to be. But I'm
Mhm.
like you when you were talking about your minister that you were talking about. I would ask the same questions. What is your
Sure.
goal? But what are you looking for so that I could get the details lined out?
So if you're thinking through your detailed lens
Mhm.
and you're having to work with Brett, right? And he's just giving you these high level broad strokes. What are some of the frustrations that can
Which I
come out of
might
that?
do. No.
Right, right. Just tread lightly. Okay, he's on the call.
No, I'm kidding. Brett is a lovely person, and like you said, he is very selfless in his approach to things. I try to listen to what he is telling me, and then I think in my detailed brain, or I write it down. I said, okay, well, let's look at this. What about this? What about
Mhm.
that? What could happen here
Yes,
for there? And or closely at the end, I say, and what can I do to help you with
sure.
to achieve that goal of that
And
bigger
that's really
picture
good.
after the details are kind of mapped out.
That's really good. And
And
what I'm hearing about the way that you two are interacting with each other is trying to see it from the other person's perspective and trying to
mhm,
meet those needs. You recognize kind of where your natural strengths are and where your natural limitations are, and you're trying to figure out how can we serve each other well out of those strengths. And that's really the you guys could hop off the call if you want, because that's really the underlying the underlying thing for today's message.
right.
So Craig and I, the pastor that I mentioned, we work really, really well together. We did leave that meeting really frustrated, but we came back together and said, okay, listen, I'm really good at details, and you're really good at coming up with these visionary ideas that I would otherwise miss. How can we just not get on each other's nerves and make each other better? And so we're very intentional about that. And I'll see him, I can see him start to power down sometimes in staff meeting. And I just go like, okay, I'll ask these questions later. Or he has empowered me to just make some decisions, that he trusts my judgment. Just go ahead and make those decisions and don't even bring them to me. And that works for us. And so that would be another a great way that you guys could serve each other well in those strengths and in those limitations. For the purpose of today, we're going to call those broad stroke, big picture thinkers global thinkers. And you think the whole big picture, right? And for the detail oriented folks, we're going to call them analytics. Okay, the people that tend to analyze and need to know all the details. So for the purpose of today, those are kind of the titles we're going to stick with. But remember, I already said you can't clearly label any one person. Because what Christy said is, I've got both pieces of the puzzle, and that's 100% true. In fact, all of us have both pieces. It's just a matter of what size each piece is. So we're going to look at this is kind of the roadmap. So for you analytics who want to know where we're going, the roadmap is we're going to look at how each of those groups, globals and analytics, process information, how each group views the other group, the things that can frustrate each other, and then how we can use our differences to make us stronger together as a group. So that's where we're headed. Let's take a look at how those globals and analytics process information. Globals tend to see the big picture, as we've stated. They can do several things at one time and kind of have several things, several pipe plates spinning at once, and are totally fine and can function that way. And they really enjoy collaborative work. They like to be connected with others and really kind of working relationally. Analytics, on the other side, someone who is truly purely analytical, is going to be focused on those details primarily, kind of above everything else. They're going to really thrive when they can just do one thing at a time really, really well, all the way to completion, and then start the next thing. And they're going to prefer to work independently because then nobody else is in there messing up our system and our process and kind of where we're at. But remember, I said there's no pure style. We all have both puzzle pieces, and it's just a matter of which one is bigger. There are some who are evenly divided. And Christy, it sounds like you might be that. I, at this point in life, am pretty evenly divided. My natural tendency is details. Over time and with practice, I've grown to be able to see more of the big picture without the details. And so we can develop and strengthen in those areas, but we also can just lean on the people around us who have the strengths we don't have. So most people do tend to lean one direction or the other, or they have something that they'll default to, even if they've got the other skills kind of gathered and acquired over time. We can adapt and adjust to the opposite style of our own, but research supports that we are born with these natural inclinations and strengths. And that's just how it is. Recognizing how we're wired can help us understand how we think, how we make decisions, and how we organize what we know. Before the call, we were visiting just a little bit, Christy and I, about how kids learn differently. And one of the things that they've learned over time is that a traditional learning environment doesn't work well for all students to know or to be able to thrive. You know, if you are a kinesthetic learner and you need to move and do to learn, to sit still at a desk all day is really hard. And so you're seeing schools implement more and more different kind of learning opportunities to help with student learning. Well, the same is true in the way that we work, in the way we process information and learn and organize it in our workplaces. Some of us do much better when we can move around, and some of us do better to sit still, and some of us do better when it's bright, and some of us do better when it's dim, and some of us do better if we have a snack, and some of us do better if there are no distractions whatsoever. And so knowing ourselves helps us set ourselves up for success in the organization, and know and be able to advocate for ourselves. Yes, I absolutely want to do that big project, but I know that I need to do it at the beginning of the day instead of the end of the day, because that's when my brain is working at its best. So just those sorts of things. There can sometimes be the concept that there is a smartest or best learning or cognitive style, but that's not true. In some fields and professions, a global, more big picture, creative thought process is more valuable. And some people will think the analytics are, if you're an auditor, you would probably really, if you're running an auditing firm, you would really want analytical people doing those tasks, but you also need someone overseeing the business, right? Small business owner. So we've got to know that there's not one best or smartest style. There does seem to be the bias that analytics are smarter, but that's not true. And you think about that, if you try to imagine a workplace where no one sees the big picture. I mean, it really does take both cognitive styles to be able to pull off a successful organization. So what I would say to you is, if you're a small business owner, maybe you're a solopreneur right now and you're looking to expand, be thinking about what is your strength and what do you need to hire in order to help make a more robust organization that can function without the things being missed that you don't see. Because we all have blind spots, right? So just thinking about that is a good thing when you're thinking about growing your staff. Let's see here. It's more important when we're thinking about cognitive style to try to understand someone's behavior rather than it is to try to fit them in a category. So none of us like to just be labeled, right? Like, we don't want somebody to slap a label on us and feel like that was sufficient. And we shouldn't try to do the same thing for the people around us. Instead, we want to try to understand, why are they doing what they're doing? But that understanding helps us be more patient with them. It helps us try to utilize their strengths best and try to make sure that we're being a better complement to one another in the way that we work. Knowing our cognitive style is not about making excuses for our deficiencies. It's not going like, well, Brett couldn't be like, well, I'm a big picture thinker, so that's that. Somebody else is just going to have to pick up the slack because I can't remember when I'm supposed to be where. It's not an excuse, but it is an understanding of what our weaknesses are, so that we know what tools we need to put into place to help us succeed. I work with a woman who is a global thinker and a kinesthetic learner, and she is my polar opposite, and she's all over the place, but she knows that about herself, and she knows, because of the way she thinks and learns and processes information, that she's prone to forget things. And she said, I do not internally have an organizational system like people, like some people have. I have to create it externally. And so she's got these big boards and lots of color, not because I have lots of organizational tools and lots of color and lots of categories, but that's because that's how my brain processes. She has to build it, even though it's opposite of how she normally thinks, so that she doesn't miss things. So we can't use our cognitive style as an excuse. We use it to help us know how to succeed and what tools do we need to put in place to succeed. Okay. So Brett, you said you would fall in that global category. Why don't you tell me, what do you think globals do best and what drives globals crazy?
Okay, I'll do my
Okay.
best.
Thank you.
Global thinking in general is basically coming up with a lot of great ideas, possibly, and or being able to select which idea. This is the challenge for a global thinker, because sometimes as you're coming up with ideas, you have more ideas. And analytics is already trying to detail out the first idea before you've really decided on the idea that you're going to follow through with. For example, I've had this happen to me in my career before, many times, only to find out that they just need to wait until, and this is the part that follow up for your question about what drives us crazy, is let us follow through with the thinking process globally so that we can actually give the analytical person the opportunity to detail out only the thing that's going to be necessary to detail out, rather than let's detail out everything first. And that's kind of annoying, because it's like, well, I don't want to spend too much time. You'll find that about global thinkers. Time is their enemy. And then it's, it's something that we all deal with. That's okay. I try to put it in check too, actually. It's like, okay, I just need to take time to make time to do this, even if
Now tell
you don't
me,
enjoy it.
before you move on, tell me what kind of person, global or analytic, makes the best supervisor for a global?
Wow.
There's not a right answer. I just want your honest answer. What do you think?
Well-rounded every time. In fact, that's what we all strive to be. But if I had to, I would say that as a supervisor, that's rough. It would be somebody similar to you rather than somebody who's your opposite. However, the people on your team would need to be the opposites to get it done. So I got nothing on that. As long as
It's
they're on
tricky,
the
right?
team, I don't.
Because if you're a global and you've got an analytic as a manager, you're going to feel micromanaged. You're going to feel like they've got their thumb on you all the time, and like you don't have freedom to work. And you don't need that, but you do need some structure. I think, and when I've done this in person before, sometimes the globals will say, we need a global who leans analytic. You know, they're global. They're still the big picture person, but they lean that direction. All right, Christy, help me out. What do you think analytics do best, and what drives analytics crazy?
I think being able to decipher the details of what the global person is thinking about, trying to have a realistic view. I think what drives analytic people maybe a little crazy is the global view can be so wide that you realize, and I'm not speaking about Brett specifically, I'm speaking about all global, is it's so wide that analytics just think in their head that can't happen.
Yeah, they're shooting for the moon.
Right. And
It's
that's
hard,
a wrong
yeah.
way to look at
Okay.
it, but I see my brain doing that.
Okay.
I will say in my personal relationship with my husband, I'll go, no, that's not going to happen. No, we can't do that. So I find that focusing on the details, what's more realistic. I do like to work independently so that I can get things done. And then as we talked about your, time management, checking a box. But then also waiting for the global to kind of, as Brett had mentioned, kind of bring down their idea to specifics, give them some time to process it, let them
Mhm.
have that thought process, let them kind of fly with it because they are creative. But then analytics come back and say, okay, how could we do this?
Okay.
What do we need to compromise? If we need to compromise, what could we compromise? What is compromisable in the idea and the project?
Good.
Yeah.
What do you think, what kind of person does an analytic need as a supervisor? What makes the best supervisor for an analytic?
I think somebody that is analytics themselves.
Okay.
I think that's a good management style or a good mesh with that. But globally, they can also see down the road. Here's
Yeah.
what our
So you want an analytic that leans global.
yes, I think that would be beneficial to an analytic personally.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
yes,
think so too.
it does.
And
Yes.
y'all hit the nail on the head. This is what people say all the time. And so I have a real life example for you that Cynthia gave in the book. She served on the board of a church once,
Mhm,
and there was some youth event coming up, and the global was responsible for scheduling the meeting,
mhm.
and they just had a quick visit with the other globals they were standing around talking to, and so they all made it to the meeting, but nobody sent out an official notice, so the analytics didn't have it on their calendar and they didn't make it, right? And so it's just the globals that show up, and they start planning, how are we going to get the word out about this event that's coming up? And all the big ideas, right? Like all of these really great shoot for the moon ideas came out of the conversation. All this creativity is flowing, and they landed on they would buy 1,000 balloons that were marketed for the event, fill them with helium, release them, and they would come down all over the town and invite people to the event. And they left, and they were like, this was the most laid back meeting we've ever had. Nobody was telling us, no, this won't work. Nobody was saying, like it was just easy. And we just came up with it. And then that's the plan. So then they have the follow up meeting. Well, the analytics show up to that one. They got the invitation this time. And when they did, the analytics were like, okay, I'm sorry. Do you know how far helium balloons travel? And it was like 200 or 300 miles. So to release it was when they come down, they're not going to come down in the target area. And somebody else, a different analytic said, and also curious, do you know how long helium balloons stay in the air? And it was going to be like 30 days after the event was over before they would actually make it down. And so here are all of those, no, this won't work, right? Christy, what you're saying, no, this won't work. This will absolutely, and this is the frustration because the global's hearing, no, 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 you have a bad idea. And the analytics looking at it going, nothing about this works. And what they decided is, because it was the board Cynthia was on, she has done a lot of groundwork with them talking about, we have global learners and analytic learners and we need each other. They decided right then they could never have another meeting without equal representation from both cognitive styles, because without it, we either come up with an idea that'll never work, or we plan a whole bunch of things and we have no idea what we're actually trying to accomplish. And so y'all killed it on those questions. Thank you so much for that. All right, let's look at the preferences of an analytic and the frustrations, and we'll see if Christy missed anything. So analytics love an orderly process. We love to know what the order of things is and how we're going to accomplish what we're going to accomplish. Analytics love knowing what to expect. We don't like to be caught off guard. We don't really like surprises. We just want to know exactly what to expect. And we love being objective and consistent. We want to be able to look at things and know what works, what doesn't, every time. What frustrates an analytic is a sudden change in plans. We've got it. I had this recently. I recently planned an event, and we show up the week before, and I'm having the volunteer meeting, and I'm delving out all of the instructions to these dozens and dozens of volunteers. And somebody raised their hand and asked a question. And in me, I was like, we can't change the plan. I've spent 3 months making the plan. And then had to kind of go, wait a minute, there are other ideas that are good besides my own. And it turned out it was a great idea, and it was a change we needed to make. But it frustrates us when there's a sudden change of plans. Also dealing with vague generalities like, hey, I want to make a opportunity to connect on Sunday morning, make it happen. I don't know what to do with that. And so that could be a frustration as well. And then being forced to work together. Remember, I said analytics often like to work alone. And so when you force them into group work, that can be a frustration for them. And that's not true for everyone, right? And this is not intended to be a gross generalization because not anyone can be completely labeled, but that would be the tendency. Chrissy, does that sound right to you?
Yes, that sounds perfect. I do find as I get a little bit older though, I kind of try to adapt more to change. My husband is not someone who does well with change at all. And we've gone through that in our 32 years of marriage of things change. You don't have control over them. So trying to be more open-minded about, like you said, the changes,
Yes.
which
Okay.
comes, I think, as you get a little bit older, but also on a team, everybody's different and you have to be respectful of what everybody wants. I've never been a person go, nope, unless it's my kids, my way or the highway, it's got to be, and then let's go through the details as we go. So yeah, no, I think that's very accurate.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for pointing out too that we can develop skills over time that make us more well-rounded leaders, like Brett was alluding to, that we want leaders that are well-rounded and have kind of both represented cognitive styles, but we have to develop those. All right, let's look at what the preferences and frustrations of globals are. Globals like to spread everything out so they can see it. They have a full visual. I'm going to have little stacks on my desk, right, where I'm working on this project here and this project here, but they like to spread the stuff out so they can see everything. They want to feel understood and appreciated. And this is one of the global preferences that I absolutely have. I want to know that you understand where I'm coming from and you can appreciate it even if you don't agree with it. And globals appreciate and prefer flexibility and variety. They don't want the 9 to 5 where everything's exactly the same all the time and it's predictable day in and day out. They want to be able to mix it up. They like the idea that things might get shaken up today just a little bit. Frustrations for globals would be the opposite, then the too much routine, or having to sit and listen to us talk about a lot of details. That can be really frustrating. And you can see it happen. You can watch their eyes glaze over like, I'm no longer here. It's like you mentioned children. It's like when I'm talking to my kids and I'm like, okay, I've overstayed my welcome. They're no longer listening to the things I'm saying. And then having to work alone. Globals in general are very collaborative workers. And so to have all those big ideas in a vacuum, they would really rather bounce them off someone and kind of get some feedback and be able to kind of flow into where we're headed. Brett, does that sound right and fair?
Nailed it.
Nice. Okay, good. So now that we know kind of what the two cognitive styles are, and you probably already have a very clear idea of where you fall or which piece of the puzzle is bigger for you. The next thing we want to look at is then how do we use those natural strengths and inclinations to strengthen the whole team? And so we've talked about how other people's strengths can frustrate us in the way that the global doesn't want to listen to the analytic, ask all the questions, and the analytic is frustrated by the lack of direction or the constantly changing direction. But we also can really use those to be a complement to one another. So that event I was telling you where I was organizing those dozens of volunteers was a 3-day community-wide birthday celebration for our community. And I was coordinating our church's part in all 3 of those days. And our pastor was actually the one that got invited to lead that. The city contacted him and said, we'd like your church to create a citywide worship service, and we would like for you to participate in the festival downtown and the football game on Friday night. Can you make that happen? Of course, that's a big idea. He's like, absolutely, let's do it. And then the next thing he did was outsource all of the details. He was like, it's me and another girl in our office. I need y'all to take care of this. There's no way I'm going to get all the details. And so he knew what his limitations were and invited us and our strengths in to be able to pull this thing off. But now what I can tell you is, if they had come to me or Carly, the other one in our office, and said, we need you to plan a 3-day thing, we would have been like, that's impossible. That's way too many details to try to put together. I don't even have a vision for what this could be. What do you want? What do you want the worship service to look like? What would you like our role to be in the festival downtown? Where do you want us serving on Friday night? And so it was great to have Craig come in with this overview of this is what it's going to look like. This is what our role is going to be. Now y'all take it and run with it. So we had a direction to run toward and total freedom to use our analytic strengths to make it happen. So you see how the two can be a real complement to each other. When the team, Brett mentioned it's great to have a well-rounded leader, and that is true. But some of us are going to have a really big global piece or a really big analytic piece, and we're running a small business. Then we've got to round out the team around us so that we can be as productive and effective as possible and really do the most with our business. So we want to make sure that, as I mentioned before, we're hiring to our weaknesses. We tend to gravitate toward the people that are just like us. We tend to, Christy and I, we could sit down and start talking details and be like, yeah, we're kindred spirits. Absolutely. I'm hiring her. But really, I need a Brett. I need a Brett who has big ideas. And then I give the authority to be empowered to share those ideas freely in our organization. And so we've got to be thinking about those things as we think about growing our teams and inviting people in. And then also just think about the people you already have on your team. What are their strengths and how could we better utilize them so that I'm not butting my head against the wall trying to figure something out and they're not butting their head against the wall. We could just swap what the assigned duty is potentially to be able to be most efficient. It really is, though, important that we come away with the understanding that the people on our team are not intentionally trying to get on our nerves. They're not trying to get under our skin. They're not trying to make things harder on us than they have to be. I was so frustrated that day when Craig said, "Don't overcomplicate it," like it was a cuss word, like overcomplicating it meant I had done something wrong. And that was my frustration. And really what he was saying is he couldn't understand it how I was seeing it. And I couldn't understand it how he was seeing it. And so we have to just come at it with that perspective. And when we do, it's going to eliminate a lot of conflict on our teams because we're trying to understand where the other person is coming from. People aren't irritating us on purpose. They're just working the way they work. They're working the way they were wired and designed to function. And we've just got to allow that to be part of our workplace and focus on the good that whatever the style is brings to the table. So let's look a little bit at what those strengths are. Globals bring some really incredible strengths to a team. They make sure people are comfortable, considered, well thought of, that they feel like they're a part. They're going to be the ones that make sure that we've got refreshments or snacks or drinks. And that can, if you're an analytic right now, you're like, that sounds fluffy. I don't even know why that's necessary. But the truth is, you think about when you're going to connect with somebody, what do? You go to dinner or you go to lunch or you go to coffee. Food has a way of helping us connect, and globals are going to be the ones who tend to think of that. Globals will also quickly grasp overall concepts. So if you've got a client who's asking something of you, it's going to be a global who's going to pick up on what are they looking for? Okay, I have an idea of it. Now they may not know how to execute it, but they're going to be able to grasp the concept of what's being requested, and that's valuable to the team. And then they're going to be able to deal with a lot of interruptions and still focus. So if you're a leader and I'm this way, interruptions, it's like I have to start the whole day over once one comes. Maybe your second in command is a global and you give them the authority to field all of those interruptions and make decisions for you, or at least know when to bring the bigger issues to you. And so that's a great way to use global's strengths to make the team stronger. For analytics, we bring strengths to the team as well. We are normally the ones that get asked to record the minutes, which if you're a global, you're like, minutes, who even needs those? Until you need to refer back to them later to remember what we actually said we were going to do. Because don't meetings happen that way? You have the meeting, you get it all lined out, then 3,000 things happen over the next 2 weeks and it's time to do something. And you're like, what did we even say we were going to do? The analytic is going to be the one who took the notes that you can rely on to make sure we know what we're supposed to be doing. They also can be the ones that are counted on to help steer a team back to task or to stay on point. Recently, our pastor asked me, and that's my current work team, right? I have my own business, and so I'm a solo. It's just me, so I have to be all of the things on 3 days a week, but 2 days a week is when I'm in working with the team that bring all the other things that I don't bring to the table, and that's both equally wonderful and frustrating. So that's why those are all of my reference points right now. But he recently asked me, "Can you run this meeting?" Because they're 3 hours long when he's running them, because we get pulled all over the place and nobody pulls us back on. And he said, "Can you run the meeting?" And it was under 2 because we could, and I'm like, "All right, cool. Thanks for that input. Now let's move on." And it kept us on task, and we could finish the conversation quicker. So that brings value to an organization. And the analytics going to be the one that points out the details that other people might miss. And so you think about, you're trying to serve clients or customers. You don't want to miss details. You want to provide the best possible service you can. So you need an analytic that is maybe it's going to be analytic that's doing quality control, right? That's making sure nothing got missed before it goes out the door, whatever it is. So you can see how both cognitive styles absolutely bring strength to the team. Now, here's the problem, and we've kind of hit on this some in our informal conversation, but this is how we tend to view each other. We don't tend to view the strengths. Globals tend to look at analytics and be like, "Man, they overanalyze everything. They're impersonal. They're impatient. They won't really listen when we're talking because they're always trying to get to the next thing and trying to get the next thing done. They don't pick up on nonverbal cues that people are giving, so they keep either steamrolling through, or they miss that somebody was confused about an issue or whatever. And they're unwilling to take risks. They don't want to do anything fun. They're always the one that are telling us no about everything. They're like a wet blanket in the meeting, right? That's often how a global will view an analytic. On the flip side, analytics will often look at globals and be like, "God, they're too touchy-feely. Why do we need snacks? Why do we need to do an icebreaker? Why do we need to get to know each other better? That seems like a total waste of time." They're also going to be thinking things like, "Man, they miss important details. They're too disorganized, and they're random, and they're all over the place. It's like we're always chasing a chicken. Like, I don't understand what's happening right now." Whenever they get their feelings hurt so easily, if somebody doesn't like their idea, they take it way too personally. And then they have these big ideas and they totally lose interest after that initial inspiration. They're gone and on to the next thing. I haven't even had a chance to finish the first thing that we started, and now they're 3 things down the road. And this is how we see each other, where an analytic isn't seeing the strength of the global. They're seeing these things, and that's the approach that we're taking. Once we realize that our opposites are not trying to irritate us on purpose, there are some incredibly positive ways to work together. An example would be there's a hospital that they've learned this concept of the way we work. And now for their patient care, they are intentional to plan a global, to pair a global nurse and an analytic nurse together. And the global goes in and does the in-person patient care with all that touchy-feely stuff and all of the connection and all of the really important patient care things. And the analytic is handling all of the charts and all of the analyzation of the stuff that's coming in. And it is increasing and benefiting the patients and increasing their care in a way that wasn't before, because now they're finally using their strengths as a complement to one another. And so that's something that we can absolutely consider in our own individual businesses as well. That's how globals and analytics see each other. But this is how we tend to see ourselves. When we think about the things that we value, analytics are really concerned with results. We want things to be done well. We want them to be done right and done right the first time. We like to work independently. We care about precision. We care about objectivity, efficiency. We want systematic methods that make it easy to duplicate and replicate and consistently provide the same product or service. And we care about analysis and did that work, and what can we do better next time to make it better next time. Globals care and value getting credit for their effort, even if the project didn't go as anticipated, that it's noted that they tried and that they were taking a risk for the good of the company. They value collaboration and frequent feedback and knowing where they stand with people on the team, which keeps relationships clear. They value flexibility and the opportunity to explain the circumstances so that people understand how we got to where we got. They have an emphasis on morale and teamwork, which is huge in a workplace. They value ideas and creativity and enthusiasm. Now, do you see one negative thing on either side of the chart? No, they're all positive. Do you know what makes it negative? It makes it negative when their style comes into conflict with our style. That's what makes it feel negative. And when we can get our mind wrapped around, they're not trying to annoy us on purpose. They're just simply working from a different style. We realize that there is positive traits on both sides and that we can make a much stronger team. In fact, I would say not only can we should. We need each other. And instead, we tend to focus on the negative and the things that are frustrating us. But instead of looking at it glass half full, where it's like, but man, look at the things they bring to the table that if it was just me, wouldn't be present. So if a global wants to bring the best out of an analytic, oh, so sorry about that. I'm not quite sure what happened. If a global wants to bring the best out of an analytic, here's how you can set them up for success, because we tend to think about what we need, right? That's our natural inclination, is what we need. But if we wanted to shift our focus and start thinking about what do they need, how can I set them up for success? That opposite cognitive style. Give the analytic an agenda. I mean, tell them, where are we going? That's why at the top of the hour, I told you, here's where we're headed for today, because there was going to be an analytic on this call. We want to put as much as possible in writing. That way there's no opportunity for miscommunication, for forgetting something that's important. They care about precision, and those written details help them make sure they don't miss anything. We can set very clear expectations. An analytic wants to know, how do I succeed? So when we're thinking in our organization, how do I set the analytics in our organization up for success? I need to let them know how they succeed. What are the expectations? What are the expectations for your behavior? What are the expectations for this project? Clear expectations, and then stick to the plan as much as possible. Now, I know things are going to change and projects are going to have to kind of slip and slide and pivot. And that's okay. But as much as possible, stick to the plan, and then let them work independently when it's acceptable for them to work independently. Don't force group work on them unless it's really necessary for that project. If an analytic wants to bring out the best in their global friends at work, what we need to do is give them personal examples and stories, something that they can sink their teeth into. We're trying to illustrate a point for them. If I just hit Brett with facts and bullet points and graphs, he's going to glaze over in no time. But if I can give some heart to it, if I can help him lean in by the way I change my voice or my cadence or the story that I'm delivering, my facial expressions, boy, I can have him hook, line, and sinker. Exactly. So when you can give personal examples and stories, use humor and smile. The globals, they really like that. They like it when it looks like you're connecting. So as much as you can, use those things. Call them by name, or at least acknowledge that they're alive. That is really important to a global. And sometimes the analytics, we can get so task focused that we forget there are people around us. So we want to set them up for success. They're looking for connection. So, hey, Brett, how are you today? Even as you walk by to go complete your 300 item task list, you were intentional to acknowledge his existence. And then when possible, let them work collaboratively. Just because the project doesn't call for it doesn't mean you shouldn't give them the opportunity if you're thinking about how to help a global really bring his best to work. And then be flexible enough to allow spontaneity. As an analytic, I can tend to be pretty rigid if I'm not careful. And so being flexible enough to allow spontaneity. We're in a staff meeting and it's like, you know what? everybody outside. We're having this meeting outside for the rest. It's gorgeous outside. Let's go. That just mixes it up enough so that the global's like, oh, okay, okay, it was a good work day. I didn't see that coming. That was something unexpected. And so those are ways that we can set each other up for success. The next and most important thing that I think I need to say is nothing explains everything. There are lots of popular personality assessments, Myers-Briggs and True Colors and StrengthsFinder and DISC and on and on and on, right? And there's nothing wrong with those. I'm not saying that. But sometimes those tools can give the impression that they've explained a person fully. And that's not true. We are so unique and complex that nobody can be clearly labeled. We each bring valuable insights and important keys to our interactions that other people, you can't label it. They're intangibles. And so we've got to know that that a label, you can't just slap a label on somebody and then go like, now I totally understand. There's always going to be nuance, always. When we understand our own cognitive style, it can really give visibility to the different pieces of our puzzle and the people around us as well, and help us understand why they're functioning like they're functioning. Whenever we think about our cognitive style as the puzzle frame, we've got the outside. We're still, through our interactions and connections and relationships with the people in our organization, having to figure out what is the inside. It's not just because you've done the way we work today, you're not like, okay, now I know everything there is to know about everybody we work with. No, there's still so much depth and richness to what they bring to the table, and how they can benefit the organization. And it takes time and intentional effort to dig down into that and see what that is in the people on your team. We can be tempted to label because that's easy. It's easy for me to be like, well, Brett's a global. Christy thinks she's both, but she's really an analytic, and kind of slap those labels on it. And that's unfair because nothing explains everything. We are all unique and complex, and we all bring unique value to the people around us. If we were in a room together today, I would say, okay, I want the globals to go on one side of the room and the analytics to go on the other. And then I would say, I want you to split down further. Now I want you to split on who's an auditory learner, who's a visual learner, who's a kinesthetic learner. And so you never go back to a big group. You just keep getting smaller and smaller. Okay, who likes to work best in the morning? Who does their best work at night? Split further. Split by gender. Split by these life experiences. And pretty soon what you're going to see is everybody standing alone because we are so unique. Listen, you were created on purpose, with purpose, for a purpose. And you are the only person in that organization who can live that purpose out. But that's not just true of you. That's true of everybody on your team. And so we want to be thinking about how can we bring those unique strengths together to make the organization better. So with that, I'm wondering what your questions are. Is there anything in the chat, Brett? Anything that you're just wandering around in your head there?
Absolutely not at this time, but please feel free, ladies and gentlemen, to put anything you want in the chat so that we can get that question out to her, or unmute yourself and ask the question. Be happy to receive that interaction for those other globals. Until then, I will say that at least now I know what to put on my next card. It's Brett Augustine, business advisor, global dude.
Global dude.
Or I could just say global business advisor, but that gets confusing.
It gets very confusing.
So I don't want to confuse the analytics out there.
That's right. We don't like that at all. While you guys have a chance to put anything in the chat or develop any questions that you have, I will say I alluded to some of them, but just know that the people on your team also, part of the way they work is what is the best time of day for them? What is the best location? Not everybody's going to do their best work attached to a desk. Some people are going to do better in a different environment. Some people need, total silence, and some people need background noise. And that's something that can really drive us crazy if we're working in the same space with somebody. And I mentioned refreshments, and temperature matters too. Some people, I cannot work when I'm hot, and there are some people who cannot work when they're cold. And so understanding those things and understanding that too is part of how people are wired. They're not trying to irritate us by asking to use a space heater. They are just trying to function, you know. Same thing with auditory learners. When you're explaining something, somebody's on your team that's an auditory learner, they need to hear it audibly, or they need to repeat it back to you audibly to be able to make sure that they've got full comprehension and understanding. And so if you're working with somebody who's an auditory learner and all you're ever giving them is written instruction, you're not setting them up for success. That's part of the way they work. The same is true for visual learners. If you're just giving, if I'm a visual person and you give me directions on how to get somewhere and you just tell me verbally, I'm going to be in a bind, you know. But if you draw me a little map, I can get there in a hurry. And so just knowing those things. And then for kinesthetic people on your team, it is hard for them to sit still. Even for this hour-long webinar, it's hard for them to sit still. That's why a lot of people won't sit live. They'll watch them back, and they'll put their earbuds in and listen while they're doing something else with their hands. And that's not wrong. It doesn't mean they're not paying attention. It's actually how they pay the best attention. So just thinking about those things that usually anything you can identify in a coworker that kind of drives you crazy is probably part of how they're wired. And so give a little grace and try to understand where they're coming from. Any questions show up, Brett?
No.
Actually, I have
Oh,
one.
here.
This is Roger. How you doing?
Hey, Roger.
Just two quick kind of comments and related to it. Number one, after listening to everything, this should absolutely be part of any good marriage counseling for sure.
Yep.
And,
Yes.
And number two, I think, you know, what I took away from this was, you know, it's one thing to know that these different traits occur across people, but it's another thing to actually know it and then just apply that to be courteous of that other trait that you may be
Yes.
experiencing or trying to work with. I think that just that awareness was really key for something that I took away from this. So thank you very much.
Of course. And thank you for that point too, because it's not enough just to know. It's not enough just to know how I function or how you function. Now I've got to make the choice. What will I do with this information, and how will I use it to make the organization better? And we all have that choice, regardless of our role, whether we're the small business owner or whether we work for the company. We all have the choice about what we do with the information. And I think that's a great point, Roger. Thank you for that. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, and feel free to stop me, but if there are not, I'm about to let Brett have it back. I do want to mention, oh, you know what? Let me go back, because there's some valuable information right here you need to see, and I don't want you to miss it. The SBDC is incredible. So if you have questions after you view the webinar about how to continue to develop and grow as a leader, to grow your team or to grow your business, reach out to the people at the SBDC. They are wonderful. They are fairly funny and really very helpful. And I think that you will like working with them. So don't hesitate to do that. They're a great resource for you. And as a small business owner myself, I can say we need all the help we can get. So reach out to the SBDC and you won't be sorry. Now
Love
it's
it.
yours, Brett.
Thank you so much, Ashley. No, really, thank you. And I hope each and every one of you feel the incredible feeling that I have about your individuality today, because there is nobody else like us. And I thought that was a huge point you made out. And as we try to interact with each other, just remember that and be consciously kind. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing all this valuable information for small business owners, as well as Roger pointed out, are those of us that are married or have a significant other in our world. Thank you so much for sharing all that. That was really good stuff. So
Thanks for having me.
with that said, we do have some other things to get to, which is, of course, thank you for joining us today. There's going to be a quick survey that's going to go out to everybody who did join us today or who scheduled themselves and couldn't make it, just so they'll know how to contact and review the information again on our YouTube channel. And we do have some upcoming things I'd like to share with everybody real quick. And here we have Stacy Kildall, who's going to be taking over December to finish out our year, as we really, now that we know a little more about how to interact with our staff and be better managers, as well as just working hopefully better together. Now we're going to focus on the fun part for those of us that are globals, all the paperwork in our accounting department. So we have QuickBooks invoicing is going to be presented by Stacy Kildall on December 7th. We also have selecting, setting up, and using QuickBooks, where she's going to go with a big overview of QuickBooks in general on the 12th. And we are also customizing forms in QuickBooks. So those of you that are QuickBooks people, on the 14th, we'll wrap that up for you so that you can get on with your holiday season right thereafter. We wish all of you an amazing rest of your week and weekend coming up. You have an amazing day, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Ashley. Appreciate it.
Thank you.